Bush, the father, to watch the golf, and so we got displaced by the president. And then after he left, we got to go back. I'm glad that we didn't get displaced by our King of Kings, huh?
Amen.
Physical stuff, you see, is one thing, isn't it? Physical stuff is one thing. Life is not the physical, folks. That's not what's eternal, nor is it what's timely. That's interesting to me, by the way. But it is the spiritual, that which is not seen, which is eternal, God says. And in the Gospel of John, we find out that, of course, Jesus, the Word, became flesh, and He is Messiah. He is God. And I'm convinced, and I keep telling y'all this, and I may be wrong, so you can debate with me on, okay, and I keep telling people, and I've been wrong before. I don't think I'm wrong, but I could be. So if you'll show me I'm wrong, I hope I can repent. But I'm one of those people who believe that if you don't believe that Jesus is God, you can't be saved. And so in chapter 1, John starts out to show the messiahship of Jesus, the kingship of Jesus. And then we saw in chapter 2 with the wedding, that first sign that he did. And his disciples saw the sign and believed. And then last week we saw, of course, the conversation with Nicodemus. And the ultimate point is that God so loved the world that He gave His Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish. So Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again. You teacher of the Jews, you one who understands all the law, you must be born again. And then we come to chapter 4. And in chapter 4, John starts this little section, and how many of y'all know that we're talking about the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4? If you don't, I'm telling you now. Okay? But that's interesting. So we go from Nicodemus, the Jew, Nicodemus, the teacher of the Jews, to the Samaritan woman who is hated of the Jews, and yet has a history with the Jews, because she's part Jew. And so John tells us, therefore when the Lord knew the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea, and he went away into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. Now, I'm here to tell you that might be like saying, Gerald was going to Missouri, to see the country music show in Branson, and he had to pass through Arkansas. Well, no, he didn't. He could have went through Texas and Oklahoma and went around. That's the way a lot of people, we traveled that way one time. Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. He could have crossed the Jordan and went up the other side. But when you look at the map, Samaria was right between Judea and Galilee, and Nazareth, where Jesus was from, that area of Galilee. So he wasn't talking about physical necessity. Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. He could have went around. No. He had to go through Samaria. Brother Marshall Keeper used to say, God has a must list. He used that old King James Bible. God has a must list. There's some things that must be done. You must be born again, he said, talking about Nicodemus. And Jesus must go through Samaria. And folks, he must go through Samaria because of his spiritual task, his spiritual goal, what he was about in coming to earth. And so he had to go and deal with that Samaritan woman, and not just with the Samaritan woman, but the Samaritan people. And so my statement is he had to go through Samaria because he had to meet that Samaritan woman. There was a lesson to be learned. Now, by the way, I'm here to tell you that John recorded that, okay? Or John had a purpose in recording his book to show that Jesus was in fact conversation with this Samaritan woman. They're dealing with this Samaritan woman. And I want to make a point about this. I want you to watch this. Watch the context. We'll read the verses in a minute, but the think. You know, do you think or do you think you think? Well, I don't know. Let me think about it. We'll see.